The National Investor's motto is, you can get information anywhere, but here you get knowledge. And for well over 40 years now, Chris Temple has imparted that knowledge, an unparalleled, understandable, and useful take on the big picture of the markets and of our world. He has been out in front of what you see on the news every day on many themes. More, Chris has taken this macro knowledge and his unique analytical abilities to uncover unique investment opportunities. Often, he has guided his members to big winners in resources, biotech stocks, and more. His talents and connections often getting him into ground floor opportunities before they are discovered. Without further ado, here is Chris with today's topic.
Welcome back, folks. I'm Chris Temple, and today we're going to introduce or reintroduce, as the case may be, a company to you that I haven't done a video update with in quite a while, and that is Apollo Silver, whose chairman and at the present time interim CEO Andrew Bowering you're going to meet in just a few minutes. Apollo is traded and listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol APGO, as you see here, and in the US on the over-the-counter QB under the symbol APGOF. The company has got two projects of significance, one of which was added fairly recently, a project in Mexico you're going to hear about. And before I get into just a couple preliminaries myself and then bring on Andy, for the first time in a while, just the usual preliminaries. First of all, Andy and or myself might be making what could be construed as forward-looking statements. Andy's a major shareholder of his own company. He eats his own cooking, and he's excited about the prospects going forward, but also realistic, and he'll give you a realistic assessment of both of his projects, what boxes are still to be checked, and so forth. So bear that in mind. And secondly, as you also see here, with the National Investor, we are from time to time, even though Apollo Silver was recommended to my members, the paid members of the National Investor based on its merits, after the fact from time to time, and again recently, the company will pay us to do some follow-on media and market awareness type of work and so forth, of which this video is a part. Now, among the things that you look for, the checklist that you use, so to speak, and mentioning this, in fact, I want to also throw up on a screen here the working cover for an imminent rewrite and republication of one of my more popular thematic special reports I send out from time to time on the precious metals markets. You'll be seeing that just before or during the upcoming holidays. And in there, among many other things that I talk about where gold and silver concerned, what you should understand, what you should avoid, the types of companies you should buy, on that specific subject, when talking about how to vet companies. One of the things at the top of the list, and I always like to put it in these terms, is you bet on a proven jockey. And in the person of Andy Bowering, we have one of the relative handful of executives of decades-long standing in the resource industry who has got the kind of stature and I'll give you a specific example, as he was bringing Apollo Silver out a few years ago. In the summer of 2021, he was able to raise over $50 million, largely on his name and reputation. And this is when, for several years now, a lot of resource companies can't raise two nickels to rub together. And most of them probably shouldn't. They can't do it. But in Andy's case, he's got the track record. And that includes, and you can read a lot about his bio separately, but that includes having started essentially from scratch Millennial Lithium Company and selling that for hundreds of millions of dollars, starting largely from scratch Prime Mining, which is a several $100 million market cap Mexico precious metals producer, which is going to instruct the discussion that Andy's going to have with us when it comes to his most recent acquisition, and that is a Cinco de Mayo property down in the Chihuahua, Mexico area. Apart from that, the legacy, or the core project that the company has had up until now has been the Calico project in Southeastern California, based in San Bernardino County. A lot of misconceptions, a lot of learning curve that I think a lot of investors who have kind of ignored this project need to go back and look at. The company's project, as Andy will explain, is either on private ground or on patented mining claims. And secondly, in any event, this is an area of southeastern California that is already a very big mining and pro-mining jurisdiction, among other things, producing aggregates and other building materials for all of the building boom in other parts of Southern California, where a lot of houses and housing developments have been built over time. So there's two really phenomenal projects. This one also, Calico in California, has got one of the largest silver dominant resources in the U.S., with another kicker that may help along the way you're going to hear about as well. And here is my friend Andy Bowering, the chairman and interim CEO of Apollo Silver. Andy, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too again, Chris. Thanks for
Well,
having me.
oh, for sure. I'm glad we got a chance to catch up here. Regrettably, I didn't get to see you in New Orleans recently, but our paths will cross again sooner rather than later, I'm sure. As I told folks before you came on, you were able to raise a good whack of money a few years ago, set up Apollo Silver to hopefully replicate over time successes with the other companies that you've started essentially from scratch as well. And your key asset until fairly recently was the Calico property in California, which has got one of the largest silver dominant resources in the US. And just so I don't get the number incorrect, I'm going to put a slide up here afterwards anyway to make sure that we have the number accurate, but it's 110 million ounces in the measured and indicated category.
That's correct. And then
Okay.
another 60 million inferred.
Okay. And it's an interesting area that I think a lot of people, when they first hear about it, have a mental block on when they hear it's in California. And immediately you think of granola and soy and environmentalists all over the place. So you could never get any mining done. But you're in an area that is a very big source of building materials, minerals, aggregates, and so forth for parts of the California market. So tell us a little bit about the location of Calico before we get into its resource and finer points, and what brought that to your interest in the first place when you decided to buy it.
Okay, well, thank you. So the Calico, made up of the Waterloo deposit and the Langtree deposit, is near Barstow, California. It's at the bottom of the Mojave Desert, and it sits on private land. We pay taxes on it. It's fee simple land. It's been designated for mining. It's within the San Bernardino County, which is a well-known county for mining in California. There are over 90 some odd operating mines in the county. And as you mentioned, a lot of them for aggregate, for building for the Southern California building industry. But Rio Tinto's borax mine is 15 miles away from us, and it's a monster. And to the east, we have Equinox's Castle Mountain, which is a major gold producer. So it's a county that's known for mining. The head of the Department of Mines for the county in the past, George Kinlan, will tell people that there hasn't been a mining permit turned down in San Bernardino in the last 25 years. That being said, the permitting application to expand the Castle Mountain gold mine has been dragging on for, I don't know, close to 3.5 years now, or maybe 4, but ultimately they think it will get permitted. So it's a place where you can go to work. There's rail lines that cross through the region. There's highways. There's the labor force. There's all the right things that you would look for. But it's an area where there's not a lot of water. And so that becomes one of your issues. The property itself doesn't have any environmental species on it that cause a problem, like Joshua trees. And so in our mind, it was a fabulous looking resource. The metallurgy's been confirmed on it. It was first discovered back in the 80s. Pan American Silver bought it in the 90s. They weren't doing anything with it. So, thinking that the silver market was going to eventually be in this structural deficit and that prices were going to significantly increase, we bought it 3 years ago. And, now that thesis is starting to prove out.
Well, for sure. We finally saw silver in this past year catch up to the gold price, at least somewhat, which of course has set records all year long, time after time. And silver, not at a record high, but it was at what, its highest in 13 or 14 years now, right, Andy?
That's right.
When it
That's
hit
right.
33 or 34 recently. So, the nice thing about this, and we'll get to the water, and I want to talk about the barite component too, which could be a wild card down the road later. But one of the nice things about this, and another thing to add to what I said in my introduction that you look for, besides a proven jockey like yourself, is you want to find a resource that is easy, that doesn't have a lot of complications as far as funny kinds of geology, that doesn't have engineering headaches. And the nice thing about this setup of well over 100 million ounces of silver is that it all sits in essentially one area, fairly homogeneous, no funny stuff, but it's someday hopefully going to be something that's fairly easy and straightforward to essentially strip mine and make some decent money on.
Indeed, it sits right at surface. The strip ratio is 1 to 1.13. You couldn't ask for anything better. There's some thick, high-grade intervals right at surface. It's kind of a bump on the side of a hill, and you shave it down, and you don't have to pre-strip. You're right into ore, right at surface. So if this thing was 200 kilometers to the east on the east side of the hills in Nevada, it would have already been mined a long time ago. It just would have been. But, the process in Southern California is a little bit more complicated. Water's a little bit tougher to get, and it just sat in a company that has a lot of assets, a lot of low-hanging fruit, and so they didn't really push it forward. And, that's our opportunity. In fact, sometimes the second mouse gets the cheese, and we're going to talk about that in all of the assets in this
Oh,
company.
for sure. One of the things that intrigued me when I first learned the story from you right after you got this project, Andy, is that, and I knew very little about this previously, was that you've got a good amount of barite. And I know that in the past, one of the previous holders of this property, was it a Sarco that had done some work on?
Correct?
Okay. Barite is one of the substances on the U.S. critical minerals list as being in critically short supply. We, like just about everything, seem to import. I always tell people when it comes to this story, it wasn't just sneakers and t-shirts and TVs and whatnot that we outsourced over the years to China and others. It was darn near everything. And so now we're at a place where people who have seen the news recently know this. Russia has cut off enriched uranium to the U.S., so we're scrambling to catch up there. China just added to its embargo of materials, including antimony, which has been a fairly big story in the markets recently. And barite is another substance that pretty much all of it we import. And that is the primary use for it, Andy, is it for drilling mud and whatnot in the energy industry?
That's correct. It's a weighting agent for drilling fluids.
Okay.
And so, and you're right, based on Asarco's work in the 80s, there's about a 13.5% barite credit. It is a strategic mineral, critical, and it will give us a trading card with the US government. We've never done all the work to produce a compliant barite resource, but we've told the market that we're going to do that now. So the first half of 2025, we will establish a compliant barite resource, and that should give us a trading card with the US government. It might unlock some loan guarantees. It might unlock some funding. It might ease permitting for us. It might even help us to negotiate the water rights from a closed down military base, a Marine base that's in Yermo, about 7 kilometers from the project. So there's some trading cards to be played. It's about a $500,000 to $600,000 US dollar program that we need to do. Run about 8,000 samples from our previous drilling and pulps and rejects, and and we'll get a compliant barite resource, and then we'll have a strategic mineral. And let's not kid ourselves. If the solar industry becomes a bigger driver in the future, and there's a lot of development going on in the solar space now.
Yeah.
The new solar technologies use significantly more silver, and silver's in a structural deficit. And some people are saying don't be surprised if it gets critical at some point to the U.S. as well. So,
Well, I
I don't
agree,
know.
and especially here again, that we aren't at as much of a deficit as far as what we import compared to what we produce here. But still, I think you go down a list of everything, we still
Mm.
import a lot of stuff that we don't really have to. And we're fortunate to have an incoming administration where even though you don't have to deal, thankfully, at Calico with issues with the Forest Service or BLM or whatnot for the most part, if at all. We are going to have a much different environment in the U.S. with the new Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, who is also going to be a super czar over energy and permitting and is also on President Trump's National Security Council.
Okay.
So we're going to have a lot different mindset. And hopefully, where that's going to matter to you, and this is an uber forward-looking statement, of course, but where that'll hopefully matter to you is when it comes time for you to have when you do have a more fleshed out and definitive barite resource, you can go to them and say, okay, well, we have that base closed up that's 7 clicks away. And maybe to get that barite, we'll not only provide some water, but there could be DPA money or something else because the feds
Right.
are looking at that big time now, and that's going to go up even more. So that'll be nice when that all comes. So before we get into your latest purchase or option, I should say, for the moment, uh, the chain of events that we want to look for into next year at Calico will be doing the work on the barite. And I think at some point you were looking at if all of the circumstances were favorable enough to justify spending the money, you want to do a feasibility or pre-feasibility study there.
Yeah. So look, there's 3 or 4 things.
Okay.
Yes, we're going to do the barite. The deposit is a silver only. It's not a silver equivalent. It's a silver resource. It's 100 plus grams of silver in the ground. Uh, there's no lead or zinc or anything else. It's silver. And then this barite credit. So we'll do the work to get a compliant barite resource. In the last resource calculation, believe it or not, we pulled a pit of about 70,000 ounces of gold. There is a gold formation that sits underneath the silver, and it daylights to the south. So we're going to spend a little bit of money trying to understand that because it just might be an interesting byproduct in the whole operation. And gold's on a bit of a tear anyway, so why not?
Sure.
So you'll get the barite resource flushed out. You'll get a little bit of um, exploration and assessment of the gold potential, and then we'll begin this economic study. And we might do a PEA first. Given that it's all measured and indicated, or 110 million ounces of it is, and we've done some internal scoping studies. We could go to PFS, but we might just do a PEA for the market for the second half of 2025, and we'll do a good quality one, and that'll give us a much better understanding of what the economics would look like to determine whether we should invest the $10 million that you might have to spend to get through PFS.
Gotcha. Okay, well, and that also too, I think would bolster the whole case for moving forward and getting the help that you're going to need, especially where the water is concerned, to get the thing eventually to a construction decision.
Yes.
Moving on, and you've got a great track record, not only generally but in Mexico. And I remember when you were starting to tell me this story some months back that you were looking around and had an ace up your sleeve that we might be hearing about. And sure enough, not long ago, we heard about the option that Apollo has acquired on the Cinco de Mayo project in Chihuahua. And the fascinating story, which you've told me personally, and I've heard in a couple of other contexts about how this property came available. It's certainly not the cleanest story anybody ever heard of, but you've got the reputation and track record of being a fixer on things like this, and you've got especially good experience and deep experience in Mexico. So through no fault, well, little fault of their own, I guess you'd say, Mag Silver lost this project, which has got itself already a big slug of a silver resource and more down there. And you've been able to come in afterwards and covering yourself and all of us as Apollo shareholders really well. Don't have a lot of skin in the game yet until you find out if you can make a go of this, but it's an intriguing project. So go back to the beginning, Andy, and tell us how this thing came available to begin with.
Okay, so it's a bit of a long story, but and just for the sake of your readers, look, I'm really biased in this company. I own about 25 million shares of it, north of 10% of the company. I've got multi-millions tied up in it, so I'm its number one proponent. I own so much of the company, I don't take a salary to be its interim CEO, but I've had some success in Mexico, as you said. I started Prime Mining. It's 3 million ounces of gold and silver now. It's a great resource. It's in Sinaloa, and I was able to buy that project at a really good discount because the people that had it really didn't think it was going to be easy to fix the social license problems. And it took 9 months to do, but at the end of the day, Prime got a 30-year option deal with the locals to advance it through exploration, economic study, development and construction and production.
And Andy,
So,
Andy, let me inject something in there because I know you've explained this to others before, and a lot of people, even if they follow mining, may not be that familiar with this. In Mexico, the laws are different and the structure is different, and then it's not so much the federal government that you have to go to for permission. That authority is vested in local communities.
yeah, you need the federal government and the state government to give you permits to establish a
Right,
mine and exploration permits. But many areas of Mexico, the surface access rights are owned by local ejidos,
right.
little communal groups, and you have to have an arrangement with them or they can throw you off the land. And you got to be fair. And so that's the case at Cinco. And so just to set the record straight, we have an option. We have a 5-year option to restore the social license at Cinco de Mayo, drill 20,000 meters, publicly disclose those, and if and when we get that done, we have to issue MAG, which is a plus 2 billion market capped silver producer in Mexico. We have to issue them 19.9% of Apollo. So we've got 5 years. Clock started ticking 3 months ago. We've been on the ground for 4 or 5 months. MAG got kicked off the property in 2012 after having made a major discovery. Cinco de Mayo is a carbonate replacement deposit that's 385 grams silver equivalent. It meets all of the local narratives in Mexico. You know, they're trying to do away with open pits. They're trying to find mines that conserve water or produce water, and they're trying to find mines in regions where you can benefit the community more so than any other industry. So Cinco's exactly that. It's 155 million ounces of silver equivalent at 385 grams in a deposit that Peter McGaw, the original founder, probably one of the world's authorities on CRD deposits, will tell you that this area is so valuable to the country of Mexico that it will be a mine someday regardless of who owns it. But people in suits aren't going to fix this. You've got to be one of the locals. Like here, I mean, I'm pitching you today and I'm in a plaid shirt. I'm not in a suit and tie, and that's just not who I am. I used to own my own drilling company. I'm spent years drilling. I'm a blue collar guy. That's who's got to fix this stuff in Mexico. You got to break bread with them. You got to understand them. You got to be one of them. And we've got a team that's done it in Mexico a couple times before. So we're going to try and fix it. My friends, some of the big shareholders of Prime will tell you it's $1 billion deal if we get social license restored. MAG had drilled a discovery hole right in between the two deposits, which separate by about 1.5 kilometers, and they drilled this hole at, I don't know, 700 to 850 meters depth, that 61 meters of massive sulfide that had great grade. And that hole said, man, this thing's a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And they never got a chance to drill another hole. And there's things that you have to do and not do in Mexico. And they've changed over the years. Like back in the day when Mag was there, in the beginning, you could get away with maybe having a verbal deal with the ejido. You can't anymore. It's got to be a written deal. They never had one. And so, as you start to go down the path of doing your work, if you don't have a document that you can live by, like imagine how the US would be if it didn't have a constitution to live by. I mean,
Right.
you get chaos. And
So what do these folks in the end, Andy, what do they want to see from you that's going to get them to put their name on a deal to say, okay, we like Apollo, we like Andy, he's proven down here, he's treating us fair. What are the elements that they want to see in order for you to be able to pick up where Mag left off?
well, they're going to need some money.
Hmm.
We're going to have to give them some sort of compensation. We're going to have to commit to fixing some of their problems in the community. And so the north part of Mexico is littered with assembly plants that, like Whirlpool has assembly plants there that put washers and dryers together for the US market. Two of those assembly plants in the community where Cinco is have been closed in 2024. So there's jobs there that are gone. There are pecan farmers that their orchards are dying because their water wells aren't deep enough to get the water. There's very little surface water left in this area. It's dry. And so fishermen have lost their jobs because the reservoirs have dried out. And you just got to Google things like this and you'll see how difficult it is for people in northern Mexico. What fixes that is mineral exploration and mine development. And so we've got to go in there with some cash compensation, some opportunity to help them get water to their agricultural crops so the farmers don't think that we're taking away their livelihood. We're actually going to try and develop it. The guys that did a really good job were the guys at Silvercrest.
Yeah.
And I was talking with Chris Ritchie about that in New Orleans. And he said, we did a study and we showed the farmers that if we opened our mine, we were only going to use X water. And I can't remember what it was, 11 liters a second or something. But we were going to be able to deliver 85 liters a second to the farming industry. And therefore, they were going to have a second crop. And so instead of one crop a year, they were going to get two. So we have to do things like that.
Right.
And then we have to bring them in with job training, send their kids to the university in Chihuahua and help out.
Yeah.
And rich mines, like what Cinco would be, can afford to do that.
Right.
They just can. And this whole regenerative ESG way of thinking now is so important. Like you just can't go into these countries anymore and expect to take out 99.9% of it to your shareholders.
No.
It's not going to work like that. You
No.
got to have a fair deal. You got to treat them like partners. And that's what we'll do. And that's what we've done at Prime.
Yep.
There's 20 some odd employees at Prime that are all from the state of Chihuahua. Like we've employed 12 to 14 geos from the university there. Their families all moved into Kosala and they've got wonderful community and things are good. And we've spent 4.5 years now looking after the community, looking after the local ejido, looking after the people on the ground and all the spin-offs. That's what we have to do at Cinco.
Okay.
And we have to show them that we mean business.
Okay. And then assuming that all that goes well, you've got an existing significant resource that's got all kinds of upside. When you mention silver equivalent, what we should remind folks is that this could be a much broader base metals producer, not just a silver, but you've had decent readings of zinc and lead, I think, and even copper.
Yeah, there's the deposits, that 385 gram silver equivalent I talk about is about 140 grams of silver approximately,
Okay.
2.8% lead and 6.8% zinc. And then there's a gold credit in it. And I don't know if the copper is recoverable, but there's a gold credit in it that recovers. And so yeah, it's a polymetallic.
Mhm.
It's gonna be a lot bigger. You know, at Cinco, there's also there's this deposit called Pozo Seco, which is a 500,000 ounces of gold equivalent. It's a gold moly deposit at surface, but it compares to a mine in Zacatecas, the San Martin, that um, the golden moly isn't really at all what you're looking for, but it's an indicator. And what's underneath it is the massive CRD and some big skarn deposits. And so the breadth of the mineralization at Cinco de Mayo is massive. Peter McGaw was telling me a couple of weeks ago that, I don't know, the 470 drill holes that they've drilled there, or 439, I can't remember the exact number that it is, but only 12 of them missed. Only 12 of them didn't have mineralization. And they were drilling on 250-meter centers. Like, it's a crazy big system. There's
Yeah.
lots there. We have to get to it. We have to get to it.
Okay. So you're
Yeah.
not going to, needless to say, you're going to do limited work to speak of until you've got that deal.
This weekend is the local Ejido election.
Okay.
They happen every 3 years. And this weekend, Sunday, is the election. And what I can tell you about that is that it's going to bring us to a fork in the road. And either the road's going to be, I don't know, Route 66, or it's going to be on a bumpy pothole dirt road that,
Well,
like, it's going to be good or a lot less good, and we're gonna have to figure that out. But you know, we've got plans. Like, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. This is going to take a little bit of
no.
time, but we think I
Well,
mean,
like Yogi Berra famously said, when you get to a fork in the road, you take it.
there you go.
Yeah.
And so exactly.
Yeah.
And I've worked with people that don't. They get paralyzed by it.
Yeah.
And no, man, you make decisions and you go. If
Right.
you're wrong, you fix them. But what I'll say is this. You know, when MAG lost social license to this in 2012, they lost hundreds of millions in market cap.
Yeah.
And so let's think about this. Here's Apollo. We got a market cap of, I'll call it $60 million. 14 million in the treasury. We paid 50 million or 41 million for Calico and put 15 million in the ground. Like, there's no premium here.
No.
What you have is about 350 million ounces of silver in all categories. I'm probably breaching 43 wanting to say that, but when you start throwing all this stuff together, 110 million measured and indicated at Calico, another 70 million inferred, another 155 million inferred at Cinco de Mayo, 500,000 gold and moly ounces, which probably convert to 40 million ounces of silver equivalent. You start to talk about having your arms around what could be 400 million ounces of silver, counting the barite, like giving that an equivalent of 15 million ounces. And
Yep.
even the poor companies in this space get about 50 cents an ounce. So, you know, you can start to look at a 200 million market cap for this company.
Mhm.
And the bigger ones, they get $1 to $1.20.
Yeah.
Now you're starting to talk about several hundred million market caps in these things. Like, I really believe that we have a tiger by the tail here. We have to do our job.
Yeah.
And it's something that we've done before. So
Yeah.
I'm bullish. I'm excited. You know, and I think and there's a reason why guys like Eric Sprott own it. Jupiter Asset Management's a 9% shareholder. Commodity Capital's a shareholder. Primevest Capital and Riaz Sharif are shareholders. Like, some of the best value add shareholders and really good funds on the street are shareholders here.
Yeah.
You know, there aren't many companies that Prime Invest looks at lots of things, but they put money into Lundin deals,
Right.
Friedland deals. They're food up the food chain investors, and they're
Well,
shareholders.
and like I said at the outset, Andy Bowering is an up the food chain executive. There's not very many, and I said this back when I first recommended Apollo, if you remember, on the back of that financing 4 years ago. There aren't many people in this market who, on their reputation and their name, can raise 50 million plus in a whack
Thanks.
to put something together, and
Thanks.
you did, and it's because these people know your track record and have faith in you. And you're absolutely right. I mean, if you can get the social license down there in Mexico, and if anybody can do it, you can. And then you work through the couple of jobs to do still at Calico. You've got two substantial assets, and really, especially in Mexico, with still a lot of upside, potentially
Yes.
substantial upside. So,
Yeah.
folks, nothing is guaranteed in life, but again, when you look at probabilities, and I like to from time to time, there's that old Ben Franklin example, Andy, which when Ben Franklin was trying to wrestle through a decision, he said, "I'm not going to go through a lot of pain on this. I'm just going to take a piece of paper, write down the pluses on one side and the minuses on the other." There's a lot more pluses on the side of the paper, I think, with Apollo, and a lot of things that can go right. And it's certainly worth investors' attention. So, folks, as I said early on, we're going to have more information on Apollo Silver in my upcoming special issue on the precious metals. So if you're not on my list already, make sure that you get on that list. And here again on the screen is the information to get Apollo shares if you're interested in the market, to follow them on their website and on social media, which I encourage you to do. And again, I think that as time goes on, and it's not going to go up in a straight line, but I do still think that the runway for precious metals long term is higher from where we've been. And especially if we see a broadening out of the economy and some of the initiatives I see coming for resources generally, I think silver is going to be catching up a fair bit more than it has already and start to outperform gold rather than vice versa, as we've seen for the last couple of years or so. So, Andy, thanks for the time, and I look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thanks to all of your shareholders, supporters, and followers. Thank you.
Yeah.
For much more of the National Investor's cutting-edge content and actionable investment opportunities, make sure to subscribe to Chris's free content at nationalinvestor.com. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel too. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.